Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Lyoko Retrospectives. And today we're going to be looking at a special that I've actually kind of been looking forward to ever since I started the Lyoko Retrospectives. Namely, we're going to be looking at part 1 of the two-part Ko-Lyoko special, XANA Awakens. Now, when I first started these vlogs, a complaint that I did throw Ko-Lyoko in the beginning was that it didn't really have much in the way of an origin story. Like, the first episode, it didn't just kind of threw us into the deep end of the pool and pretty much expected us to learn how to swim. Sorry. As a result, if you start watching Ko-Lyoko, it is a little easy to get lost, even if you start watching from the beginning. But with that being said, Ko-Lyoko is still once you do get your bearings of the show, it is easy to understand. It's just that, again, you never knew what led these kids to discovering the factory, or what set of circumstances led to XANA becoming an active threat, or them just kind of setting it all in motion. Just pretty much, you never knew that stuff from the beginning of the show. Well, that's what this two-parter is for. Essentially, the two-parter XANA Awakens is, well, an origin story. It explains how the group. It explains what set of events led the group to coming together, and subsequently what led to XANA becoming an active threat that they had to start taking care of, and why they're the ones dealing with it instead of something like a governmental body or something. So, yeah. But before we get into that, I want to talk about a couple things first. One, for those of you who aren't familiar with my vlogs, I'm just going to give you some heads up. I'm going to be looking at both parts separately. While I will give my full thoughts on the special at the end of when I'm done looking at part 2, I'm going to be looking at them both. I'm not going to be looking at the whole special right off the bat. So, as of right now, I've only seen part 1 of XANA Awakens. I've actually not even seen the special at all. So, aside from what I've seen today. So yeah, this is going to be one of those. So this is going to be kind of one of those going in blind sort of deals. On top of that, for those of you who are aware of the original, for those of you who like to kind of keep track of where episodes are kind of aired, or just kind of where they are, or depending on how you're keeping track, you may be wondering on why I'm looking at this special here instead of maybe at the end of season 3. Well, the thing is, so I'll just give a brief explanation for that. As I said in the beginning of these vlogs, I'm going by the order of when they were aired in English. So this special, while the XANA Awakens special was aired at the end of season 3 in France, in America it was aired as its own special, and that was put out between seasons 2 and 3. And as such, that's pretty much the reason why I'm looking at it now. If you actually go onto certain sites where they actually have the special, like on Amazon Prime, it is listed at the end of season 3. But like I said, since it was aired between seasons 2 and 3, I figured I might as well look at it here rather than wait to the end of season 3. Plus, again, it is kind of nice to get an origin story, so I figure since we're kind of I kind of figure that since we're between seasons, we might as well look at it that way anyway. So, yeah, but yeah, I should probably start talking about the episode. And well, I guess I should talk about. I don't really know how I can get. There is a plot to the episode. Don't get me wrong. But unlike other origin stories, this is one that definitely expects you to be at least somewhat familiar with the original show, because when the episode actually starts, rather than actually seeing them discover the supercomputer, we actually get a summary. But we do essentially what happened was that Jeremy, when it came to the supercomputer, rather than the group discovering it together, it was actually Jeremy himself who discovered it. Essentially, what had happened was that he was making these little machines for a science project, but he needed spare parts, and he decided that he was going to go to the abandoned factory at the outskirts of town because he thought there'd be some old junk there that he could use as spare parts and so forth. However, as he was salvaging, he managed to find the console for the supercomputer, and as he kept digging, he discovered the supercomputer itself. Jeremy got a little, as such, one day, pretty much, as he discovered it, Jeremy just kept coming back and just kind of kept it to himself, But one day, he decided that he was going to turn it on and see just what made it tick. And so he went downstairs and, well, officially turned the thing on, just kind of thinking to himself, I hope I don't regret this in a minute, which I kind of find a little funny, if a bit ironic. But yeah, he turns on the supercomputer and goes up to the main floor where the computer console is, and the instant he turns it on, he immediately is put in contact with Aelita. At first he thinks she's just like a computer program or some kind of interface, but then when she actually talks to him, he's actually surprised. And of course, Aelita doesn't know what the heck's going on herself, as she asks, "What's going on? Where am I? Who are you?" etc. Of course, Jeremy of course grows more and more curious, and so he actually goes back to see Aelita later on. However, as part of her memory issues, she doesn't know who she is. And as such, they can't. So in the beginning, Jeremy just called her artificial intelligence, which Aelita, while she responded to it, asked if she could be called something else because she thought that was a little too informal. As such, Jeremy decided to start calling her Maya, which I'm not going to call her because I know her real name is Aelita. But bottom line, Jeremy grew a bit more curious. But the bottom line, Jeremy and Aelita were kind of working things out for themselves. As when Jeremy turned on the supercomputer, Aelita essentially woke up inside of a tower. While to try and figure out exactly where she is, Jeremy asked her to leave the tower, which revealed that she was stationed in the forest sector. So it's actually kind of interesting seeing her going through that and just kind of seeing her adapt to it. But when she gets too far, she ends up running into some of XANA's monsters. And at first, she thinks that they're wildlife and that they just live here, which Jeremy, of course, is kind of geeking out over, until they start shooting at her, at which point she just bolts right back to the tower. Of course, Jeremy. They're kind of curious. Jeremy kind of thinks that maybe she should stay in there as it's safer, but things continue to get a little worse. Things continue to escalate somewhat in the real world, which kind of brings me to the other characters and how they were in relation to each other. Essentially, before everyone got involved in this whole escapade with Lyoko, they were essentially just classmates, not even friends at that. Like, for example, while Ulrich sat behind Jeremy in their science course, they only knew each other based on last names. So Ulrich called Jeremy Belpois since that was his last name, and Jeremy just called Ulrich Stern since Ulrich Stern. On top of that, this is also the episode where we see how Ulrich and Odd met. It turns out that they weren't that them coming to Caddick was literally how they met. And Odd, for some reason, had a mullet. Yeah, throughout the show, he's had his hair pointed up, but when Odd and Ulrich first met, he actually had his hair. Odd just let his hair down, so he's kind of got a mullet. It's weird and it's a little off-putting. But bottom line, in the beginning, Ulrich wanted nothing to do with Odd. And Odd being Odd, he just didn't take no for an answer and just kept bugging him, which annoyed Ulrich. Of course, Sissy still had a thing for Ulrich even in the beginning, and even in this episode, we see her telling Ulrich to come meet her in her room that night, which Ulrich, of course, doesn't have any intention of doing, because he still doesn't like her. But unfortunately, Odd's name is quickly getting added to that list, as Odd just continues to annoy him, and Ulrich is just getting more and more pissed off at him. However, which is not even helped by the fact that when Ulrich goes back to his room later, and he sees Odd with Kiwi, who, just trashes the whole room, specifically Ulrich's side. Not help when Kiwi apparently took a crap on his bed. Essentially, just in the beginning, they weren't friends, and Ulrich, being Ulrich, made no attempts to get to know him. Though, to be fair, Odd was being annoying, and if someone else's dog trashed my stuff, I would be royally pissed. I may love dogs, but that shit's expensive. I was even pissed with my dog when he did that when he was a puppy. So yeah. But of course, I should probably talk about Yumi and her connection. In this first episode, unfortunately, Yumi doesn't really have a lot of screen time. We see her like maybe once while Odd and Ulrich are just kind of quote unquote hanging out, so to speak, as we see her get a drink for herself and then walk away. And then later on, we see her at I think a karate class, which Ulrich's attending, which is being held by Jim, and pretty much the only students there are Ulrich and Yumi. And at this point, they're pretty much strangers. But when Jim pretty much tells them to pretty much fight to pretty much test their prowess, they do kind of get close, and it shows that they are both skilled. But it ultimately ends with I think I forgot which one did it, but either Ulrich pinned Yumi down or Yumi pinned Ulrich down. But bottom line, one of them got pinned. They were close, and at that point, when they both realized just how close they were, they both just stopped fighting and both blushed. At which point, that's when Jim ended the class. However, that again, things continue. This is where like I said, things continue to escalate more and well. Going back to that scene I mentioned earlier, where Ulrich and Odd were just kind of hanging out, and we briefly saw Yumi. During the scene, Yumi was getting a drink from I guess a coffee machine, and Ulrich and Odd were just kind of on standby as she got her drink. After she gets it, Jeremy goes in to get his drink. However, when he hits the tap to disperse it, the machine actually ends up shocking him and knocks him down. Ulrich ends up seeing this and takes Jeremy to the infirmary because that's dangerous. Only as they leave, all the buttons on the machine immediately flash with XANA's symbol. At which point, as such, while Jeremy's able to recover from the incident and he's able to go back to his room, he ends up getting another visit from XANA, as while he's at work, XANA hacks into his computer and takes control of his science projects to attack him. Jeremy, of course, it's at this point where Ulrich gets in. After Kiwi trashed his room, Ulrich just had every intention of reporting Kiwi to the principal. But as he's leaving, he heard Jeremy struggling with the machines and ran to go help him. While they're able to fend off the machines, Ulrich is now just curious as to what the heck's going on. Why did these things attack him? Jeremy doesn't really want to tell because he knows these are connected to Lyoko, as when XANA possessed them, his symbol appeared on his computer screen, and Jeremy recognizes that from when he accessed the supercomputer. But Ulrich pretty much tells him, "Look, I'm not leaving until I get an explanation, so you better fess up." As such, Jeremy decides, "Okay, fine, but you gotta tell me you can keep a secret." As such, Jeremy takes Ulrich to the factory and pretty much explains the whole situation to him. That he turned on the computer and the supercomputer, and that within is an entire virtual world filled with four sectors and everything. Which Jeremy kind of got that whole thing down when Alita first stepped out of the tower. As the instant she stepped out, he saw the map of Lyoko. He explains to him about Alita and how he thinks that she's on Lyoko, and that if he can figure out a way to, and how he thinks that if he has enough time, he can devirtualize her and take her out of there. But he thinks that somehow that somehow this is connected to the machines that attacked him. Since again, XANA's symbol is connected to Lyoko. Ulrich, of course, doesn't believe him. He thinks this is all just crazy and that Jeremy's just making this stuff up. But he does humor him for a little and says, "Okay, say this is true and whatever's in this computer is connected to those things. Why don't you just turn it off?" To which again, Jeremy mentions that he can probably devirtualize her, which is where he talks about the scanners. Like I said in the beginning, Jeremy has apparently been coming back to the factory on his own for quite some time, as he's been able to familiarize himself, with much of the technology there, which brings him to the scanners. It turns out while he is still having trouble finding a means of devirtualizing Alita, he has found the program to virtualize a human being, essentially just send them straight into Lyoko. Ulrich, of course, still is a little doubtful, and Jeremy says, "Well, why don't we use them and see if they work? Then you'll believe me then." To which Ulrich says, "I'm not getting in those things," and Jeremy says, "Well, maybe we could get a guinea pig." To which Ulrich, deciding to be more of a dick, decides, "I think I know the perfect guinea pig," as he goes back to his room and grabs Kiwi. However, as he's grabbing him, Sissy, who got herself all dolled up for when she thought Ulrich was going to come to her room, gets angry and decides to call him, which in turn causes his phone to ring, which wakes Odd up. At which point, once he awakes, he sees Ulrich with Kiwi in his arms, and then he just chases him off. However, Sissy, when she didn't get an answer to her call, ends up leaving her room to try and confront Ulrich personally, which in turn she actually catches Ulrich and Odd as they're leaving, and she ends up following them, chasing. They pretty much Odd and Sissy end up chasing Ulrich all the way to this underground cavern in the building, which brings them to the sewer, and from there they end up following him all the way back to the factory. Ulrich ends up bringing Kiwi straight to the scanners, and they get everything. And Ulrich doesn't know that Odd and Sissy followed him. So after he puts Kiwi in the scanners, he goes back up to the main floor where the console is, and tells Jeremy that everything's set up. But that's when Odd and Sissy arrive. They manage to take the elevator and go down to the scanner room. But once they arrive, Odd sees Kiwi in the scanner and immediately just does what anyone would do. He runs forward, picks his dog up, and is like, "Oh, thank God you're okay," and just it's cute. I like it. But Jeremy and Ulrich don't know that Odd's there, and they immediately activate the scanner. Kiwi ends up jumping out of Odd's arms, but the end result is that the scanner closes with him still inside, and they activate the virtualization process, which in turn sends Odd straight into Lyoko. And of course, Odd's just like, "What the hell's going on? Where am I?" And Jeremy just tries to calm him down and say, "I think you're in like a virtual world. Delarobia, you're in a virtual world, and you're in a virtual world. I think I can direct you." And Odd, of course, is just kind of like admittedly taking all this in stride a little, though he is a little shocked about everything. But again, as things continue on, they end up having as Odd is wandering around, he ends up encountering the Cankerlights. And since this is literally his first trip to Lyoko, he doesn't know how to fight them. At which point, they open fire on him and makes a run for it. Jeremy realizes that he needs help, and so Ulrich decides that what if he went in? Well, initially he volunteers himself and Sissy because they become aware of Sissy's presence there too, as she finds them. As she goes up to the main floor, as she made herself known. At which point, but Sissy says that no, she doesn't want to be a part. She doesn't want to go in there. She'd rather stay in this world. And so Ulrich decides, "Fine, you're lost. Fine, you're lost." And he decides he'll let himself be virtualized too. At which point, Jeremy virtualizes him, and what I like too is that when he goes into the virtual world, he's admiring himself too, especially because he has a sword, which actually also brings up something that the show kind of talks about, namely why they have the looks they do when they're on Lyoko. Because Odd asks, "Why does he have a sword and I've got these little cat claws?" Well, Jeremy pretty much says, "I don't know, but from what I can guess, I think your forms are based on your subconscious desires," which I admit I think kind of makes sense. Again, we saw that Ulrich's kind of a fighter, and as we've seen throughout the show and in this episode, he does have kind of an attitude and is kind of fierce. And combine that with his karate training, it makes sense why he would have the setup he would have combined with a sword. On top of that, as I mentioned, one of Odd's key designs for his suit is a picture of his dog Kiwi peeing on his chest. If we go with the subconscious desires and that creating the virtual avatars, it actually does explain some little things like that. But bottom line, since he has a weapon, it means he can help Odd fend off the Cankerlights, though they still know how to defeat them, so they both still kind of make a run for it. As Odd's comparing how Ulrich's got cool weapons and all he's got are claws, Odd accidentally ends up shooting off his first laser arrow, which he thinks is actually pretty cool. But again, yeah, Jeremy at this point tells them that since they're still inexperienced with fighting, Jeremy says that they need to go find Aelita, but unfortunately, before he can tell them where her tower is, that XANA ends up attacking in the real world again as he takes control of several wires in the main lab and essentially tries and attacks Jeremy, pretty much getting him away from the computer. And Sissy unfortunately can't do anything to help him. And she just reacts the way anyone would, as she just backs away into the elevator and actually starts crying because again, these are live wires that are attacking a guy. I think if there's anyone that, and she's like a kid at this point, it'd be crazy if she wasn't scared. However, Odd and Ulrich do manage to find a tower, and while they don't know if this is the one that Aelita's in, they decide to just try it out anyway, and they manage to go inside, but it turns out their aim was off, as while they do go inside the tower, they're not on the platform and end up falling into the empty space. However, as we've seen throughout the show, when you fall through those when you fall down in a tower, it doesn't actually kill you, and instead sends you to a tower in another sector. And as such, they emerge straight into the ice sector. Of course, they're just wondering, where the heck are we? Where the heck are we? Where's the forest and everything? But as they're looking around, they happen to see another tower across from their way. Only this one is the one that XANA activated. Of course, again, first trip, they still don't know that this is the activated tower, but as they get close, that they encounter a group of boxes, and again, they're still inexperienced with fighting, so they don't really know how to take these guys out, which results in Odd getting devirtualized. Ulrich is left to fend for himself, and while he does manage to find one of the box's weak points, he only managed to take out one before he gets devirtualized as well. However, when they virtualize, they do manage to find Jeremy being attacked by the wires, at which point Odd and Ulrich end up charging in and helping him and manage to disable one, which causes the rest and freeing Jeremy, which causes the rest to kind of recede. And as such, the episode ends with Aelita calling them, asking what's going on, and they just pretty much tell her that everything seems fine for the most part. But yeah, kind of an abrupt end. But yeah, that's sort of an abrupt ending, I guess. So yeah, again, this is kind of the trouble when you look at two-parters. When you look at each part individually, you can't really talk about the full story yet because again, it's just half of the story. But with that being said, while this is still just one half of the story, I will admit it's not bad. It's interesting. Again, one of the I guess I could throw this one is that it does somewhat expect you to have experience with Lyoko, as it does feel a little rushed in certain areas, like with the introduction of characters. It does expect you to know who these people are beforehand. Like in the beginning, we don't see Jeremy working on his project before going to the factory. Instead, we get just a summary of Jeremy saying, "I want to get some spare parts, so I went to the factory, found the supercomputer, and turned it on." And thus, the plot kicks off from there as we see him working at the computer, meeting Aelita, and discovering Lyoko. From there, on top of that, we don't really get much in the way of introducing the characters. Again, it expects you to know who they are. Like we see Ulrich, and we see Ulrich, we meet Odd, and while it is shocking to see him with a mullet, this is just essentially showcasing how they met. And again, Yumi barely has any screen time in this episode, appearing in 2 scenes and then having nothing to do with the plot afterwards. She's just there, and it does make me wonder how she eventually becomes a part of the group. Though considering the blush that she and Ulrich shared during karate class, I'm guessing Ulrich is the one that pulled her in. But again, to its credit, it's still interesting to see these beginnings, and it does actually feel like it's the beginning. One of the things that this episode does, that the voice actors actually do sound like they're straight out of season 1. I'm not saying they're bad by any means, but their tones of voice and inflections do feel like how they were at the beginning of the series, which I think does make for some interesting continuity. And again, I do like the growing pains that we kind of see in the episode with the group. Again, Ulrich and again, when Ulrich and Odd go to Lyoko, while Ulrich is more capable than Odd, they're still inexperienced with Lyoko and don't know what's going on. And it is kind of nice seeing Aelita in the beginning. Just kind of seeing Aelita in the beginning. She's just as clueless as the rest of the group, and she's just figuring everything out on her own. But again, she's just kind of positive. She still kind of has the positive attitude that she's maintained throughout the series so far. It's like, hi there, hello, who are you? Like, she's taking it all in stride. Y'all, she does ask, who are you, where am I? Again, she's just kind of content because she's got people she can talk to and they can work with. So it's actually nice, so it is nice. Nice in that regard. And again, I do kind of like seeing them gradually developing the threat and even showcasing the first instance of a XANA attack. And what I find interesting, too, is the fact that the XANA attacks are centered solely on Jeremy. I'm not going to go into full details in this part, but I do kind of like that, because this kind of ties into something that a commenter in the last video mentioned. Again, if you're watching this, I don't remember your name, I'm going to have to go back to look at it, but that's just part of the reason I'm not talking about it here. But when I finish the two-parter, I do want to talk about that. Just kind of discussing the idea of XANA going after Jeremy, which I do kind of find interesting, especially since he's the one that turned on the supercomputer. It's actually kind of nice, and it's actually kind of interesting, and again, I'll go into that when I'm... Actually, you know what? Screw it. I'll talk about it now. Actually, you know what? Screw it. I'll talk about it now. Again, apologies to the commenter who commented in my last video. I apologize, I don't remember your screen name. I'll put it in the description when I go back to look at it. But bottom line, he mentioned something that he mentioned a theory that I think does hold ground. I mentioned how at the end of season 2 we learned that XANA was a program that was designed to destroy Carthage if worse came to worse. However, and I mentioned how the reason why XANA went nuts is because essentially he was built to destroy, and he just grew, and he just grew from there. Well, the commenter in question had said that a possible reason why XANA grew that far is because XANA feels like this is the most efficient method to just essentially destroy Carthage. Not just destroy it, but pretty much getting rid of anything that has to do with it. That's why he's attacked. It would explain why he's why he was targeting Aelita and kept her locked in Lyoko, why he turned on Franz Hopper, why he's attacking the group, hell, even why he's attacking Jeremy in this episode. And we're going to go on that theory and baseline that XANA is attacking anything that is associated with Carthage to ensure that it's completely destroyed. It would explain why XANA targeted Jeremy in the beginning of this episode. While Jeremy's the one that woke up, that activated the supercomputer, woke him back up, the fact that he has access to the supercomputer and is aware of it makes him a threat, and does make him a threat, even if he doesn't, even if he's not aware of XANA. If XANA wants to make his plans known, he can't let anyone know that what he's doing. And again, since Jeremy was the one that turned it on, it technically makes him the new head of this thing. He's the system admin, the new operator for Carthage, and XANA can't let him get anywhere near that. So it's a nice little double-headed it's a nice little two-for reason. It's a nice little double-edged reason. Essentially, well, I can't say double-edged. It implies that there's harm to him as well. But essentially, it's a nice twofer. Essentially, he's getting rid of Jeremy because even if he's not aware of Lyoko, he's still an active threat. Even if he's not aware of XANA, it still makes him an active threat because he knows about Lyoko. And on top of that, since he's now this new system admin, it technically means that he's now involved with the Carthage project and thus needs to be gotten rid of. Again, that's actually kind of nice. That's actually it's something interesting that I like. And again, I'll post his name in the description when I remember it. I'll have to go back to the comment section, but this theory is kind of his own. That essentially XANA, the reason why XANA went rogue as he is because it's possible that he's essentially trying to get rid of anything that's associated with Carthage, and that includes the people that work on it and possibly the world connected to it. It's just all to accomplish his goal. But yeah. But that again, it's a theory and it's an interesting one. I recommend it. But I don't know what much else to talk about. Again, when you look at two-parters like this, there's only so much you can talk about in the episode. I guess it is also interesting to see how the group has met. Again, they are more informal in the beginning, when Jeremy talks to Ulrich and Odd, and likewise them to him, they only refer to each other by their last names. Ulrich is Stern, Odd is Delarobia, Jeremy is Belpois. So they're not really friends in the beginning. They don't hate each other, but they don't hate each other, at least aware enough about each other, but it's obvious that they're not really they're not on regular speaking terms either. On top of that, although another thing that I find interesting is the fact that Sissy herself was actually there when Xana became a threat, which honestly I do find interesting. I mentioned before in the series that while Sissy is essentially the school bitch, she has had her more noble moments, and when push came to shove, she did help out. But this episode, and which is why I constantly said that if she ever became a member of the group, I think she'd be a good addition, even if she didn't do any helping. But I think this episode is I think from what we see in this episode, I think I understand why the group never made another attempt to bring her in on the secret. Because again, when it came time to rush into battle and help Ulrich, or help Odd, she just decided to stay in the factory and be a spectator, and when the real danger actually occurred, she was justifiably terrified. And while that is an appropriate reaction, because again, if I saw like a gaggle of wires just suddenly come to life and attempt to attack me, I would probably go, what the hell, and just bolt. That is what I would do. So Sissy's reaction is completely justifiable. But with that being said, it would explain why they make no attempts to bring her into the fold after this. Because based on the fact that she becomes aware of Xana and all of her problems and everything that he does in this episode and later episodes, she's completely clueless. That means that there's going to be a return to the past at some point in this two-parter. At some point, they're going to return to the past, everything's going to be undone, and the only people that are going to remember it are those who went on Lyoko and Jeremy, because I guess he's the system admin. I don't know. But, again, that would actually explain... That, again, I feel like this episode does kind of explain that. Since she, at this point, she's more of a spectator than anything, it would make sense why they would probably not want her to be involved, especially since if things get dangerous, she can't really do much to help out. Well, as again, she backed away and nearly had a heart attack when the real danger occurred. It would actually explain that. It would actually explain it a bit. Again, it's not. Again, I would still stand by that if she was a regular member, she could still help out in other ways, like being their cover at school and just telling her dad, "Hey, Dad, can you just cover for them, please," or something. That I think would actually make more sense, and I think could still be justifiable in having her be a member, if just to give them cover, like maybe just have her pop onto Lyoko for just like one visit, and then have her get devirtualized. Again, thus her memory would stay intact. But again, I feel like that there could still be potential there. It's just I'm saying that this episode really does give a good explanation why they never made her a regular member. After this, essentially at this point she's a bystander, and that just makes her collateral, and they don't want collateral. So, yeah. Again, there's only so much I can talk about for the first part. The first part at this point, because again, it's only half the story, and like I said, the episode just kind of ends before the episode just kind of stops after they attack the wires. Again, so yeah. I really don't know what else to say. Again, I guess I could talk about my full thoughts on... I guess, as the first half, it's fine. Again, there are some problems. Again, expecting you to at least be familiar enough with Lyoko to know who the characters are, having things be rushed in some areas, not having you discover certain factors along with the characters. Again, it is nice seeing how things got started, and it is kind of cool seeing everything from the beginning. But again, as an origin story, it does genuinely feel like this is something that you should know at least somewhat, and it feels like you should already know something about the characters before stepping into this, and as a result, combine that with some slight rush pacing, it does feel like the episode is just kind of there to help fill in a few blank spots. Again, it's not bad, it's pretty decent, but overall, as the first half of the origin, it's fine. Just fine. well, this is just my opinion on the first half. Well, so next week we'll see if we'll have my opinion goes from fine to really good. I don't know, but yeah. Again, that's really all I can say for the first half. I hope you found some enjoyment out of this. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and tune in next week as we look at part 2 of XANA Awakens and see just how the group figures out how to defeat XANA in their very first outing. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week. Take care.